and have normal looking conversations about negotiating terms of a contract, and then send you an email saying, here's a contract, please sign this. As soon as you download the file, it turns out it's actually an executable file, which can then run code on your computer, and it's game over at that point. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki. In today's video, I'm joined by a special guest, Shannon Morse, a content creator focusing on online privacy and security. Today, we're going to talk to you about how to secure your YouTube account and how to stay safe online. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what people can expect to find on your channel.
Yeah, definitely. So I usually focus on consumer tutorials and reviews about new products that are coming out. And one thing that I've noticed not a lot of people really go into when they do reviews is security and privacy. So that's been my main thing for about the past year. I've always tried to focus on some kind of security and privacy tutorials for the masses, not just for like information security professionals.
So a quick overview of today's video. We're going to start by talking about different kinds of hacks, different ways hackers will try to break into accounts. And since we're here on YouTube, we'll also talk about a few tips for brands who are working with YouTubers. So let's jump in. So I think one of the most common, or at least easiest hacks to pull off, or that attackers will try, is the idea of just stealing a password dump from one service, and then people can try those passwords at other services, because it turns out people do reuse passwords even if they really shouldn't, right?
All the time. And it's really unfortunate because as cybersecurity professionals, we're always telling people don't reuse your passwords. And it's extremely prominent when you think about how many leaks and how many breaches happen from day to day. I mean, that's one of the main news sources whenever I'm doing one of my shows about security and privacy breaches is leaks of data. So I constantly tell people, please don't reuse your passwords, because if you do, somebody could easily take that password, just copy and paste it into some other website and just try their luck. And they're basically gambling and hoping that you're reusing the passwords everywhere.
And that kind of attack, it's super easy to pull off. It's super easy to just try. And if it doesn't work, it's very cheap when it fails. So it's easy for hackers to just collect thousands of these passwords, try, and some percentage of them will work.
Back in the day, we used to have these things called rainbow tables, and they would just be like basically just huge Excel spreadsheets or huge tables of passwords. Thousands and thousands, and most of the commonly reused passwords that are found on documents that are publicly available online. And it's very easy for a malicious actor to take these thousands of passwords and just throw them at websites. And chances are, if you are reusing your passwords, or even if you're not, but you're using something that's really common, they'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And that takes us to the second part of this kind of hack.
And this is actually something that I have done just to test, just to see how common and how easy it is for a malicious actor to do this. And it's really, really easy to create a fake website, have somebody click on something in an email and jump over there and put in their username or their email address and their password. And chances are you'll be able to collect that information in plain text so you can read it with your human eyeballs, and you will be able to see exactly what they put in. So
the idea of multi-factor authentication is a solution to this problem.
Yeah, so an ATM is a great example. An ATM, when you walk up to one, you need your card, which is something that you have, but you also need a PIN code in order to be able to withdraw money from your checking account. If you don't have both of those pieces, number one is something you have, and number two is something you know, that PIN code, then you can't get access. If an attacker was able to gain that second form of authentication, the PIN code as well as your card, then they would also be able to access your account as if they were you. But when it comes to online accounts, 2FA can be extremely, extremely useful whenever you are trying to protect those accounts, because chances are somebody may be able to find your username and password online from some other breach, but they may not be able to get that two-factor authentication code.
So let's talk about the SMS or the Authenticator app ones first. So that will look to you like you've just typed in your password, and then before you actually get access, it then sends an SMS to your phone or asks you to type in the code from your Authenticator app. And you have to type in the 6 digits or whatever it is. And That way it's then protected with the second factor. And of course, the idea there is that if you did reuse your password and someone stole it, the attacker probably wouldn't also be able to access your phone or have your authenticator app.
You would absolutely have to be targeted as opposed to somebody just trying to attack anybody on the website that they're targeting. You would have to be the specific person being targeted.
But that's a really good point of bringing up the idea of whether you're being targeted, because it turns out that the different options you have available to you to protect against the different kinds of attacks are going to have very different levels of effectiveness depending on whether you're protecting against targeted attacks or these broad attacks. So getting back to the specifics of 2FA or multi-factor authentication using SMS or these authenticator apps. So these will protect you against these sort of broad attacks because it's not worth the hacker's time to go after and chase down the specific person because they have plenty of other accounts they can try. The problem though is that if you are being targeted for an attack, both SMS and the authenticator apps, multi-factor authentication, can also be phished. If the attacker can trick you into giving them the code that was just sent, then they can complete the two-factor auth challenge just as easily as you can.
Exactly. And that is one thing that can happen if an attacker, for example, is copying a website and recreating it on their own server. Not only would they be able to steal the username and password, but they would also be able to just copy over the 2FA code that you type in to the website. So oftentimes that can be a vulnerability when it comes to authenticator applications that you download on your phone. Now, I will say though, the authenticator applications are safer than getting a code sent straight to your phone number. And the reason for that is something called SIM jacking or SIM hijacking. And that's a really major vulnerability that has become more prominent in the past couple of years because attackers have found so many ways to be able to basically clone your phone number onto their own SIM card and their own phone and be able to basically just get all of your text messages, including 2FA codes that are sent via text, over to their phone, thereby basically bypassing your phone and your SIM card in your phone over to their phone, and then they can just log in for you as if they are you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. SMS as a second factor is probably one of the worst second factors available because it's phishable, as in they could just put up a page asking you to type it into the fake website, but they could also steal your phone number, and it sounds far-fetched, but it's really not. There are so many documented cases of this happening that it's no longer a theoretical possibility. It is absolutely a risk that is worth keeping in mind.
So even though somebody would still be able to SIM jack your phone number, I still recommend doing that over nothing if that's the only option available on a website for your account. Now, if they do give you several different options, including like 2FA codes sent over phone number, as well as authenticator applications, as well as hardware keys, then I definitely recommend that people choose one of the harder to phish options or the ones that just are not possible to phish instead of using SIM cards and phone numbers.
So speaking of, let's talk about two-factor auth methods that are not phishable. And that's where we start getting into the hardware keys, which are a lot of fun.
Yes, they are my absolute favorite. They're super inexpensive. You can get very, very inexpensive ones from companies like Yubico, or even Google has created their own hardware key. And all you have to do whenever you have one of these is go into your account, set it up in the settings, choose a hardware key or hardware token, and when you go to log in, all you'll have to do is put in your username and password and plug in this little hardware key into your computer, and it will let you log in.
But there is no way for a website to trick you into using your key at the attacker's website, because the way those work is they actually generate different credentials depending on the website that's being asked. So it's not like the key has some sort of password that it uses and sends to the website. It's actually doing this all with cryptography so that every website that you're logging into gets a different credential based on that key.
And there have been previous vulnerabilities with hardware keys. For example, way back in the day, RSA had a vulnerable hardware key where somebody would be able to generate or assume what the next key would be as it's randomly being generated. So it wasn't quite as random as we had hoped. But since then, we have seen a lot of technology growth in this industry for hardware tokens and keys, to the point where these are absolutely the best option for 2FA.
It's probably worth also mentioning that some recent developments in browsers and in operating systems actually mean that your phone can often act as a hardware key itself, using Face ID or whatever biometrics are available in the phone. And it's the same idea, is the phone has this sort of internal key, which is then used as that factor that, again, can't be phished.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that. As an Android person myself, I know that both Samsung as well as Google's Pixel line, both of those have hardware keys just built into the phone. So it's really easy to just sign up on whatever accounts you're going to, choose the hardware authenticator application option, but make it the phone as opposed to purchasing a separate key, which can be very handy if you don't want to carry around a separate hardware key. You can just have them sent to your physical phone, your physical device instead.
Two more types of hacks that we want to talk about before we get into tips about how to protect your accounts. The first one is what we call OAuth phishing. Now, OAuth, that's actually where I spend most of my time in the security world, actually creating the specs and teaching people about OAuth. I know you have some thoughts about OAuth as a login technique. In fact, we'll link to that video. There's definitely some concerns about using OAuth as your login to other applications, but that's actually not what we're concerned with here. The idea of OAuth phishing is actually something different. And that's the idea that an attacker might trick you into authorizing their real application to get access to your own account.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because OAuth phishing is a real targeted attack that people have been using to gain access to social media platforms. And on YouTube specifically, YouTubers have been hacked because they have used some kind of third-party application tool that turns out was malicious, and it gave an attacker access to their entire YouTube account because they gave that application permissions to do things like change videos or view the email or view the account status or the phone number associated with the account.
The reason it would be considered a phishing attack is if the app tricks you into doing something that you didn't intend to do.
And if you give some third-party application access to those kind of permissions, you really have to make sure that this is an application that you trust. So one thing I highly recommend people do, maybe once a year or so, is just go through all the third-party apps that you have approved on your Facebook account or Twitter or whatever social media platform that you use, and delete any that you are no longer using or delete any that you just don't recognize. The less things that you have connected to your account, the less doors that could remain open to an attacker.
So the last type of hack is an attack where the attacker actually clones your entire browser and assumes your identity on every website that you're logged into.
And when you say browser cloning, that's exactly what it is doing. It's specifically going to the browser and cloning all of the data from that browser. Not just like the websites that you're currently visiting, but also any kind of saved settings. So any kind of login status that you currently have, like if you are logged into Facebook or logged into Google or YouTube, then it's also cloning that kind of information too. And they are, again, pretending to be you just on a completely different device.
It sounds kind of far-fetched, but it is 100% happening today. We have seen YouTubers having their channels taken over by this kind of attack. And the worst part about this kind of attack is that it completely bypasses 2FA, any multi-factor authentication, because it's essentially cloning the entire browser where you already have gone through the 2FA challenge.
So they don't even have to be in your vicinity. If they are able to steal your cookies and clone your browser, for example, then they could do that in a completely different country, a completely different state. They don't even have to be anywhere around you or even on the same Wi-Fi network.
This is not going to happen by just visiting a link. This is the kind of thing that would essentially require running a program on your computer. Because as soon as a program is running on your computer, it has access to your entire hard drive, and it can very easily just go find where the browser is storing cookies and siphon them off somewhere. So this attack, in order to pull this off, would require getting you to run a program that was carefully crafted that does this attack. So you're not likely to just visit a link on a website and then suddenly have your browser copied. However, if you download anything and run it, there is a chance then. That's why you always hear never open attachments from emails, never run random exe files that you find, things like that. So that was a survey of a bunch of different kinds of attacks. If you have anything of high value, whether that's a very popular YouTube channel or a cryptocurrency wallet with a lot of money in it, that kind of thing can make you a larger target for these kinds of hacks. And then you may find yourself being personally targeted for an attack.
Absolutely. And in the case of most consumers, I would say that they are not going to be targeted specifically. Usually that's going to be your political targets, journalists, social media influencers, YouTubers, people that have some kind of public persona that they need to protect. Those are the people that are going to be targeted the most.
This is actually one of the reasons, though, that this kind of thing is so difficult to protect against. Because once you are personally targeted, there are a lot of creative techniques hackers can use to try to hack you, attempting to trick you into giving up your second factor codes via SMS or the authenticator apps or whatever it is, or socially engineering you into downloading a file that runs on your computer that then clones your browser. It takes a lot of work to pull off, so the attacker has to be really invested, but it is effective because the attacker may spend weeks going back and forth with you over email pretending to be somebody legitimate, like a brand you might be wanting to work with. And they'll spend the time to build up a relationship and have normal looking conversations about negotiating terms of a contract, and then send you an email saying, here's a contract, please sign this, download this file and send it back. As soon as you download the file, it turns out it's actually an executable file, which can then run code on your computer and clone your browser. And it's game over at that point. And that kind of attack is so hard to watch out for because it otherwise would look like a pretty normal interaction of working with a brand, right?
So if you do see a company or a person sending you an email with an attachment, always look at it with a little bit of skepticism, because if they are, and if they do understand that security and privacy issues do exist online, then they will be willing to work with you and they will be willing to send you something that's not an attachment, instead is something that is viewable online.
This is a really important distinction because browsers have done a lot of work to protect the browser environment and make sure that there's very few ways that a website can do anything outside of that website itself. So it's almost impossible these days to click a link and then suddenly have your computer be infected. However, the desktop environment of a desktop computer is not like that at all. That's sort of a playground for hackers right now, because if they can run code on your machine, they can do a lot of things. So trying to keep things in a browser is a much safer way to go. So instead of downloading files, try to open them in a browser. Instead of receiving downloadable attachments from companies or brands, ask them to send you links to view it online.
Absolutely. And there are encrypted options for being able to send documents back and forth online. There's several different applications that you can use for that. Additionally, I did want to mention too, a lot of companies that you may work with online may want to send you a contract that you have to sign. And when it comes to using something like that, there's also online applications and services for that too. So for companies out there, if you are sending documents that people have to sign, accept digital signatures and then they can just sign them digitally in the browser, as opposed to having to download something, print it out, sign it, scan it, and upload it back to you. In fact, you'll get your contracts a lot faster if you do it digitally as well.
And one other tip for brands that are working with creators specifically, I know a lot of brands have outside agencies doing their PR work, and it's a very normal thing, and creators will usually understand that. The problem is that this provides an opportunity for hackers to create social engineering attacks. Attackers can pretend to be a PR agency, impersonating the fact that they work for a brand, and talk to creators without the real brand or the real PR agency even being aware of this communication, and try to establish that fake relationship. So if you are an outside agency working on behalf of a brand, see if you can get an email alias at the brand's domain.
As myself, somebody who is extremely paranoid online and knows that I am a target of attacks, That is something that I look at, is what domain email addresses are coming from. And if I don't recognize it, I don't even reply. I just delete it. So if a brand is trying to get a hold of me, I'm going to delete that email unless I have some other form of contact with that brand. So for example, if Google was trying to get in touch with me and they sent a message from pragencynewyork.com, like some email address from there, I wouldn't recognize that. So I would probably go directly to somebody that I know at Google's PR in their internal PR agency and ask, are you working with this company? And if they say yes, then I will absolutely reply. But if they are like, I don't know who that is, then I know that it's some kind of phishing scam.
And these kinds of phishing or social engineering attacks are very hard to detect and very hard to avoid because they are carefully crafted to attack a specific person and go after what that person wants, which is to work with this brand. And they know this, and they know what buttons to push and how to trick you into replying and thinking they're legitimate.
It all comes down to your online security and privacy hygiene, what you do from day to day. Because if you do come at it as a user or a consumer or a public persona that just doesn't care about security and privacy and assumes that companies are going to do it for you, then you do run a greater risk of being attacked or being targeted or being hacked. So it's two-sided. The companies need to do a lot of work to make sure that their consumers, their product market is being protected. But we as consumers also need to make sure that we're putting forth as much security and privacy that we can to make sure that the same exact phishing and hacks do not happen to us.
Awesome. Well, those are some great tips. I hope you got something out of the video today. Thank you, Shannon, so much for joining me on the channel. It was great to have you here. I will also be joining Shannon's channel for a guest interview over there. So go take a look at her channel. I'll leave a link down below. And we'll be talking all about live streaming gear over there.
Thank you so much for having me on. That was so much fun. And I am so happy to have you coming over to my YouTube channel and teaching me more about live streaming, because that is something I'm seriously going to be doing very, very soon in my own personal future for my studio. So thanks for having me on. It was super awesome. And if any of your viewers have any questions, I'm always available to ask questions to regarding security and privacy. I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining and helping educate my viewers all about online security and privacy as well.
Yay!
I'm gonna cut now.
Okay. Me too. 3,